Digital photography made simple. Hi, welcome back to Digital 1-to-1. On today's segment, we'd like to show you how zoom lenses operate and how using them correctly can make our pictures look better. Now this works with all type of cameras, from point and shoot to SLRs. Now using this zoom lens correctly can make all the difference in the world in your shot. Now as you can see from those shots, one of them is pretty distorted, but by using your zoom lens correctly, you can get a better shot. Now remember, when we use our zoom lens to move in on a subject, we are changing our focal length. Here's a series of images showing you what focal length is. This series of images show how our lens operates from its widest angle to its longest zoom, showing our subject and our background are affected by this procedure. Take notice, when we move our lens closer or zoom in, our background not only grows closer, but more out of focus, because we are keeping our focus on the ball. But one important note, when using our zoom lens, our aperture or f-stop will determine how much our background will be in focus.
As you've seen in our sample images, we used an SLR that allowed us to have control of our aperture or f-stops so that we can keep our background in or out of focus. Now, some point and shoot cameras will allow us to have control of our f-stops, but most of them don't. So next time you're looking for a camera and you want creative control in your zoom lens to have a choice of whether you want your background sharp or out of focus like that, then we advise you to talk to your retailer about a camera that allows you to do that. Now here's a great pro trick for you. If your focal length on your zoom lens is a larger number than the ISO setting, in other words, your telephoto is at 300 millimeter and your ISO is 100, then use a tripod. Even though you have image stabilization on your camera, it's always a good rule of thumb to use a tripod when your focal length is more than your ISO, because you want to get the best sharpness that your lens has to offer. Hey, you pay a lot for them, you might as well let them do the job they're supposed to do. And here's what focal length means. It is the numerical value in millimeters that are associated with the optical settings of our lenses. In other words, we have a 28 millimeter, a 50 millimeter, or a 300 millimeter, which is more associated with what we call a telephoto lens. Now we have a small graph to show you of what the optics look like inside a zoom lens. When we move our lens from a wide angle and then zoom in, what we are really doing is moving one of the optical glass elements in our lens towards another. And each time we zoom in and out, we are shifting these elements. And that's why the barrel of our lens physically moves in and out when we use our zoom. Now we have a little demonstration where Santino and I are going to show you how to use your zoom correctly. Our first shot has the camera set at its widest focal length, meaning our widest angle. And Santino is going to be concentrating on the action here at the other end of the pool. Let's take a look at our first shot. But like we saw in our first image, the action was a little too of a wide angle for our liking. In order to get a better shot, we're going to use our zoom to move in on the action a little bit more to get the shot we really want. And since Santino doesn't want to change his angle of view and he can't get across the pool unless he can walk on water, we have to use the zoom to get a better shot. Here, take a look at this one. Now, this second shot was a bit better, but we still have a bit of unwanted space that we don't want in our shot. So Santino now is going to zoom in with his lens all the way into the max. Here, take a look at our third shot. But there's one more thing to consider when we are using our zoom capabilities. Our first images were taken without moving ourselves closer to the action, or the action moving closer to us. However, we can use our zoom more thoughtfully and creatively by moving ourselves closer to the action, or vice versa. Now, this very act of paying attention to our surroundings as the photographer is what makes us better than just being snapshot shooters.
Another thing to consider when we're photographing with our zoom lens, the part of the wide angle of that zoom lens, you have to look at the distortion, especially when you get real close to your subjects. Now we're going to show you a close-up shot using that wide part of the lens, how most people would take the shot. Take a look at the forearms showing you that distortion. So a way to avoid this issue is to pull back from your subject, use your telephoto lens, zoom in, reframe your shot, and this way you won't have any of that distortion and you'll have a great looking shot.
Our space around us, the physical surroundings, are as important as the framing of our image. Let's remember that. We can utilize that and physically move ourselves in and around when we're taking our shots. It's what makes us creative photographers and how we become digital one-to-one photographers.
So look to our other videos on framing and foreground and background to enhance your understanding on zoom lenses. So experiment with your zoom lens.
And don't just stay in one spot when you take your photograph. Use your knowledge of your physical space around you and know your knowledge of your zoom lens.
So for the best tips on digital photography, look to us here on Digital One-to-One.